Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 5 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, a Tuesday morning, October the 5th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I don't have the chat room open, actually, today, just because I don't think that many people are up and listening to anything on Blog Talk Radio. So I'm just talking this week and last week about anger, what is anger pre-test, and the shame-rage connection and whatnot from angerresources.com. So that's www.angerresources.com, ANGEROURCES. And it's a great website. I thought I knew a whole lot about anger, and it turns out that I really don't. I took the pre-test myself before I was just talking about it on the show. I got quite a few of the questions wrong. So it's quite interesting to see what we actually know about anger. And if you've dealt with child abuse, you know there's a lot of anger issues that surround it, and on both sides, whether it's the abuser or then later on the survivors of abuse having to deal with the aftermath, right? And so that's why I wanted to look at this, right? So it's been very, very interesting to me, and I want to finish up the pretest here today. There's only 3 questions left, and then move on to another section. And so thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. So we're going to get right into this. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my blog talk show because I just wanted to be one more voice out there for people who may have survived child abuse, and also I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And, it's all about promoting awareness, education and awareness to prevent and stop child abuse, right? So I just want to be one more voice really out here with all the other voices speaking out against abuse and standing up and saying, this is wrong, we have to change this. And so I'm in between courses at MRU here in Calgary and can't afford to go right now, so I continually study anyway. And so I thought, well, I'll just bring out the information that I find helpful. And also for me, a survivor, I thought I just want to be one more voice for other survivors to say, you're not alone, and to reach out and get some help, whether it's a therapist, counselor, group support, whatever works for you. Just make sure that you do reach out and know that there is help and hope out there. You have to keep looking for it and keep reaching out, and you'll find it, right? This is very important for people to know, because sometimes we don't think there is any hope or help out there, and there is. But it's literally, it's up to you, it's up to me to take the first step and reach out, because quite often it just doesn't come and land in our lap. Help doesn't knock on the door and say, hello, I'm here to help you. That's very rare, if at all, something that would happen. We have to reach out. We have to be the ones to want to heal and to want to get some support, right? So just make sure you do reach out and get some help, right? It's so important. So, I'm not a counselor or anything. You have to listen to at your own discretion. And also, I talk about the issues of abuse, right? So my shows are pretty sensitive. And if you find that, this topic might bother you, just turn the show off. You won't be hurting my feelings at all. You have to know what's good for you to listen to, so please listen at your own discretion. And, anyone under the age of 18, I just ask that you have an adult listen to the show with you, mainly because I'm all about protecting children. And there's so many crazy psycho people out there trying to get a hold of children, child sexual predators, pedophiles and whatnot, that you have to learn how to keep yourself safe when you're online and sitting in different chat rooms and whatnot. So be very, very careful. Get the information on how to keep yourself safe, and for parents, get the information to keep your kids safe, right? So important. And because there's a lot, my shows, there's a lot of adult content on my shows because we're talking about child abuse. So it could be very sensitive and kind of scary for young people if they've never heard a whole lot about this stuff. So you should have somebody older who's an adult listen to the show with you, so that they can help you to decide whether you should be listening or not. So that's why I say that on every show pretty much, because I really care about children. That's what I'm doing with Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we work to fight to save children's lives, right? So that's the whole issue. We're really trying to promote education and awareness about all the issues that are going on out there to protect children, right? It's so important. So make sure you do, let somebody know what you're doing when you're online, and learn how to keep yourself safe. Just type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, or, online safety for families. and get the information on how to keep yourself safe, right? It's so important. So we'll get right into this topic here, and this is from www.angerresources.com. It's a pretest, and we're on question 23. And we left off on question 22 yesterday. These are all true or false, and they give you the answers to them. So as you go through the questions, you answer true or false. Then they tell you what the answer really is. So question 23: explosive and disrespectful anger destroys intimacy, trust, and safety in a family environment. Is that true or false? It's true. It says explosive and hurtful anger creates fear, intimidation, mistrust, and a lack of safety. It says in an abusive atmosphere, family members will be much less likely to take emotional risks and to share honestly and openly with one another, because if there's explosive and hurtful anger going on in the home, in a relationship, then family members will be less likely to take emotional risks. They won't want to open up because they kind of fear the retribution for it, or maybe they just don't want to put their heart on the line like that. So that's the whole issue when people, first of all, anyone in the home is acting, in that manner, in a disrespectful, angry manner. It's hard on everybody around them. So whether it's the children or the adults, it's very, very hard on everybody who's involved, because it definitely it sort of reflects on everybody in the home, right? Even if it's not directed towards you, it's still very damaging to be around. And so, it's people tend to shut down in that situation. They won't be as honest or open with each other because they just don't want to open up another can of worms or open up that door to have their heart broken or whatever, right? So that's the whole thing. It's very, very hard on people. 24, question 24, it says, if your anger is justified, you have the right to really go off on the other person. That's what Dave Decker's written here. And so that's true or false? If your anger is justified, you have the right to really go off on the other person. That's false. I mean, we all should know the answer to that. No one has the right to abuse another person, verbally, physically. It's not right, and it's against the law. It says false, even if your anger is justified. For example, if you have accurately perceived that someone or something really is out to get you, it is still not okay to become explosive and disrespectful. And it is not an effective and useful way to address the ongoing issue or problem that exists between the two of you. So that's something that, most people, if they've grown up in a home where there's a lot of violence and negativity and a lot of bad behaviors on parents' fault, caregivers' fault, that it's hard on everybody. And many times people think, oh yeah, well, I'm mad at you, so my anger's justified. And then they do. They either verbally abuse somebody or emotionally, psychologically assault them, physically assault them, right? Because they feel justified that they have the right to really go off on this other person. Sometimes siblings will do that. They're mad at the other sibling for, whatever reason. It could be a justifiable reason, but there's still no reason to abuse anybody. Like in their mind, they might be able to say, well, this is totally justified because look what they did to me. But it's not justified, because no one should be abused ever. So that's the whole thing, right? All we do is pass on abuse when we do that, right? So even if we feel like it's justified and we become abusive, explosive, and disrespectful, it says, we're not helping anything, because it's not really addressing the ongoing issue or the problem. So that's really true. And I think that what he's written here is very, 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 very good information for most people. Because I've gone off on people when I was angry, and I really felt justified. I was like, yeah, that person, look what they did to me. And, it really let out a lot of verbal or emotional abuse towards them. And when I was younger, a young kid, I used to be very kind of physically violent, but that's how I grew up, right? So I was just passing it on. So if a kid did something to me that I didn't like, I felt justified to go ahead and hit them, because that's what my parents were doing to me. So, I would slap little kids across the face. I'd beat them up, punch them and throw them down on the ground. I was quite violent when I was a young kid, but that's because that's what I was witnessing at home, And that's what I was having done to me, so I thought that was the way we had to handle everything if we got mad about something. I didn't realize we could talk it out or we could discuss things. There was no discussing anything in my home as far as getting to the bottom of things. It was all either verbal or emotional or physical abuse, right? So you just learn to do that, and then eventually I had to sort of straighten out and I didn't want to hurt anybody. Especially when I got older, I realized, hey, I don't want to really hurt anybody. In my heart, I knew that what my parents had done to me was wrong, and that what they were doing to each other was wrong. So see, we can't just, even if our anger is justified in our own mind, it does not give us the right to hurt somebody. It doesn't help anything, and it doesn't, it just doesn't get us anywhere. The problem still exists. And then so it just doesn't solve anything, right? But it's important because so many people, this is the way that it's kind of like, well, you treat me this way, I'm going to do this to you, and that's just not a good way to handle things because it never ever gets solved. It just keeps going. Question number 25. It says, if you grew up in a family where people were abusive and explosive with one another, you are more likely to be abusive and explosive in your adult life. True or false? And that's true, he says here. Although not everyone from abusive families becomes disrespectful and abusive themselves, this is the primary place where you learn how to experience and express your anger. And this is an important reason that many adults, in fact, become abusive in their own lives. Well, it's a cycle of abuse, right? So if you grow up in an abusive family, in an abusive home with a lot of explosive, abusive behavior, and that's just the norm for you, quite often people will take that on unless they get help. They'll take that on in their own adult lives with their own families and children, and that's the cycle of abuse, and that's how it continues on. And without them even thinking there's anything wrong with it. That's like my parents, they wanted to live their lives like that. They both grew up in abusive homes, in really backward times, in a backward place. There was kind of like the sort of the mountain people, I mean, these people that they didn't have any knowledge of how to properly raise kids, and kids were just tools really to use on the farm, and kids weren't to have to love and to nurture and to care for. I mean, generally back in those days in the 20s and 1920s, people had children to help them on the farm or to help them with whatever, because it was the times were hard, and there was a depression going on, the Great Depression, and things like that, very, very hard on families. And if they had children, they certainly weren't enjoying them. They were just there to help them with the farm or whatever, right? So this is the area they grew up in, right? Very rural communities, farming and whatnot. So they would have 10 kids, and they would just be workhorses. They would just be, expected to work, and there was really it wasn't like they were all sitting around having fun together. And so that's the thing, and quite often mistreated, and that's the case in my parents. Both of their cases, they were both mistreated as children. They grew up like that. Everybody they knew grew up like that, and they did not think there was anything wrong with bashing each other, bashing their children, psychologically and emotionally and verbally assaulting each other and their children. They just thought that was the way life was, So when they were told to go get court-ordered counseling, I think they were probably pretty shocked. My mom didn't want to lose her kids, so they said, yeah, they would go. So they went twice, and that was it. Because they wanted to continue living this life. My mom had every opportunity to get away from my dad. She had every opportunity to leave. She could have left. She could have even left us, But she thought, no, this is my life. And she even said that. This is my life. I'm married to this man. And we've been married for so long. This is my life. This is the way it is. Even though she was miserable, she was manic depressive and depressed. She hated her life. She didn't hate my dad. We all did, but most of us did. But the thing is, we didn't hate her. But I tell you, she was my main abuser, and I thought I hated both my parents for a long, long time, and then I realized I didn't. But she was not happily married. She was crying pretty much every night and thinking that she should kill herself. And quite often the conversations would be like, "What do you want for dinner?" And here's dinner. And then 2 hours later, after we've had a little bowl of dessert, she was ready to kill herself. This is how serious this was. She was not a happy woman, and she was in a terrible marriage. And, my dad was very abusive, and he was also kind of murderous. He's always talking about killing everybody in the home and killing us because God would want that and stuff like this. He was very mentally ill. And so my mom was just very frustrated. She was at the end of her ropes, and her sons were, doing drugs and in prison, and one was murdered, and because of the way they raised them. See, but my mom wouldn't take any responsibility for that. She blamed it all on my dad, and of course my mom was just as responsible. So that's the thing, when people grow up around that stuff, they don't know how to cope unless they get help. And my parents would not get help. So they continued that cycle of abuse right on down the line to us. And, we grew up like that, but even, about the same type of physical abuse probably that my mom grew up with. My mom didn't horsewhip me, but that's because she didn't have a horsewhip, right? But if she did, she probably would have, right? She was very physically abusive towards me, doing probably what her mother did to her, which is beat on her and curse at her. And so my mom was just doing what her mom did to her. So she passed the cycle right on down. Well, I broke it, but then again, I don't have any children, but I know that I would have broke the cycle because I knew it was wrong. And some people would say, well, how did you know it was wrong? Well, because I had some good examples when I was growing up. Like, I had some friends whose parents were really cool, and they actually kind of took me in. They let me stay at their home and went down and talked to my mom and told my mom that, hey, we're not, we see one more bruise or one more beating, we're going to the cops, and she can stay with us anytime she wants to get out of the home, out of the situation. So I actually got to see how normal families behaved. There were also a couple of, there was at least one family that we used to hang around with, and that were friends with my parents, who just loved my parents dearly. And didn't care that my parents were treating the kids like crap. I mean, they didn't care that my mom was beating me up and stuff. Like, I mean, my mom would beat me up, and then we'd go to dinner to these people's homes, and I'd show up there with a bruised face and split lip and whatnot. These people would just turn a blind eye because they love my parents so much, right? And then my mom would be like, oh, she's just a bad kid, she's misbehaving, right? And they'd be like, oh yeah, okay. And they even asked me about the home. They were like, do your parents fight a lot and stuff? And I told them when I was about 9, 10 years old. I said, yeah, absolutely they do. And I told them I had taken a bat to my dad's head one time to try to protect my mom, and they didn't do anything about it. This family knew about the abuse. They knew about it the whole time, and they just wanted to pretend that they didn't, and even today they still do. They pretend that they never knew anything about it. But see, people like to just see what they want to see. They just don't. That's just the whole issue with abuse and people that are around it. People will either stand up against it and say, that's not right, you shouldn't be treating your kids like that, and you have no business treating your daughter like that, or they should get some help for that family, even if they don't want to stand up for it. Make an anonymous phone call and say, look, there's abuse going on in that home, I know it, and you need to get over there. This is the thing, but most people don't want to do that, because then they won't. Who's going to come over for dinner? If they invite the people for dinner and they're in jail, well, they won't be able to come for dinner. See, and everybody loved my parents. They wanted, if my parents had to eventually do some jail time, they would have been devastated, because they loved my parents. They didn't love us kids. They loved my parents, see. So there was no relationship with the children, and there was a relationship with the abusers. Quite often that's the case, right? But this thing, so it's not right to be that way. So, although not everyone from abusive families becomes disrespectful and abusive themselves, this is a primary place where you learn how to do this type of behavior, right? So it's so important for people who have been abused and grew up in that kind of home to make sure that you don't repeat that cycle onto your own children, or onto your own family, or onto anyone, or even including yourself. You know what I mean? We have to get help for that. And so, I've worked through this my whole life. It's taken me to get where I am today. And, I knew I didn't want to hurt anybody, but I certainly didn't want to hurt myself. But the anger was directed inward, of course, because I didn't want to hurt anybody else. And so I didn't get any help with it. And so I was always kind of wanting to self-injure, and I was feeling the need to self-injure, and also was having suicidal thoughts quite often. I was always in the back of my mind that I could kill myself, right? And I had plans and all kinds of stuff. So this is the thing, you want to make sure you get some help, right? Don't suffer along like that. It's horrible. That is just not cool. No one deserves to be treated like that as a child. And then if you have to deal with it as an adult, it's just not even, it's not funny. It's not cool. And then if we push that anger off on other people, because, oh, well, I was abused as a child, and so, people might be like, well, how come you're so angry, and you're so, your behavior is horrible, and, you use some sort of sorry excuse like, well, I was abuse as a child and I don't know anything different. It's like, well, we are all responsible for our behavior. My parents wouldn't be responsible for their behavior and never took responsibility for it and still don't. My dad's still living and he blames it on the 1960s, the devil, and something else, I forget. But he won't take responsibility for his own behavior, but he's schizophrenic. So there you go. And he's got who knows what else, borderline personality disorder. I mean, he's got lots of problems. So, which he never got help for, which is unfortunate. He was diagnosed and then didn't bother to go get the help for it. So my mom was diagnosed manic depressive. Well, being married to him, it's no wonder, right? But she was probably already manic depressive from being abused as a child. She was horrifically abused. And my grandmother, I just, have no love for her at all. My mom's mom, she's a horrible woman, and she passed on her hatred onto my mom, and my mom passed it on to me. So it's just not right. And so we have to be responsible for our own behavior. So if we're being angry and pushing other people around, and even whether it's verbally or physically, right, we're just battering people all the time with our words or with our actions, or even if we're not physically abusing them, but we're just throwing things around the room and becoming volatile, we are no better than the abusers that abused us. That's the truth. Because we're causing people to be upset. We're causing people to have fear. We're causing people to not know what's going to happen when we're in the room, right? And that's what was going on my whole life, was that I was living in fear because I never knew what was going to be happening. So I used to sleep with a knife because I thought, man, if you guys are going to think you're going to kill me, I got another story for you. I was about 8 years old, sleeping with a knife, thinking it'll be either you or me, and it won't be me, thinking that I had to protect myself by keeping a knife by my bed. That's the kind of fear that my parents invoked on us, right? So, we have to be really careful what we do with our actions and with our words. And sometimes, you do get upset, and I mean, everybody gets upset. That's normal. But we can learn how to not channel it in a horribly destructive way, right? We can learn how to positively channel it so that if we do become angry or something does bother us or upset us, that we can handle it properly. That's the whole issue with anger. It can be managed and it can be handled properly. We do not have to fly off the handle and hit people. We do not have to fly off the handle and verbally cuss somebody out. We don't have to, be abusive and start kicking things around, throwing things and breaking things just because we're not happy with something. And so many people, I've seen this in my lifetime with friends and family. It's horrible. It's a horrible way to live. It's horrible to be around people like that. Nobody wants to be around anybody like that, guaranteed. And it's just bad behavior. And we have to be responsible for our own behavior. So that's why I find this information very interesting. And I've learned how to get a control on my anger pretty much, but I still want to learn how to work it through it so that I don't stuff it, because usually I just swallow it down and it stays inside, and then I get so mad that I reach a boiling point and then I explode. And whoever happens to be around at the time is sadly the recipient of all this garbage that was not even their fault. So that's the thing. I'm trying to learn how to manage my anger, right? So that's why this stuff's very interesting for me. So it's kind of good for anybody who's experiencing anger issues and can't seem to manage your anger. There is help out there. So the next portion of this this website here is Your Anger Index. This is how angry and hostile are you? And that's from the same website, www.angerresources.com/angerindex.html. It's just one of the next sections under Tools and Resources. And it says the statements below describe situations that you may have experienced in your day-to-day living. If you haven't experienced it, try to imagine how you might react to the situation. Use the scoring scale to identify the response you are most likely to have in that scenario, and write your score for each statement on a piece of paper. So take whatever time you need to decide, but keep in mind that your first reaction will generally be at most accurate, representing how you would really respond, right? So our first response would be the best way to go on this. I haven't done this one yet, but we're supposed to take these 29 questions, right? And if you go through them and you put 3 is often, 2 is some of the time, 1 is rarely, and 0 is never. So if you go to this website, you can take this little test here. It's an anger index. So 3 is often, 2 is some of the time, 1 is rarely, 0 is never. So question 1 here says, I think that people who make mistakes should be reprimanded and clearly told they did something wrong. And so would that be often, some of the time, rarely, or never? That's how we would answer these, right? So you can go through and answer these questions here, and they tell you, they rate it at the end, how hostile and angry we really are. So question 1, I think that people who make mistakes should be reprimanded and clearly told they did something wrong. Question 2, I think that most people are just out for themselves and you'd better not get in their way. Question 3, when someone disagrees with me, I work hard to make sure they know that they're wrong. And I know people like that. They will, if they had to, take a rocket to the moon to prove that you're wrong, right? That's how serious it is for them. They have to prove that you're wrong, even if it doesn't matter what the consequences are for them, and it makes no difference whether it's a lot of work or not. They have to work to prove you wrong. I know people like that, and I think those people have real problems because it's like, sometimes you just got to let it go. I mean, who cares? You know what I mean? It's like some stuff is not worth spending that much time on. I mean, my God, there's better things to be doing. Number 4, I feel impatient when I have to wait in line. Now, that's something that I can sometimes agree with. Number 5, when I think about something that bothered me in the past, I can get very angry about it all over again. Well, that was me, about 3.5 years ago because I was just starting my healing journey. Actually, before I started my healing journey, I was angry all the time about what had happened to me as a child in the past, right, and things that had happened. And now I'm starting to feel better, but that's because I've been, getting some help and reaching out. But I was always angry, and that's the thing. That's why I know how damaging it really is. Number 6, if someone cancels on me at the last minute, I tend to think about how rude he or she is. That's a good question. And, I think that, depending on my day, how tired I am that day or something, if I've already had enough garbage that day and it's already been a bit much, I might think something like that. But otherwise, generally I try to excuse people because I know that sometimes things come up, and hey, sometimes I've had to cancel on people, and I wouldn't want people to think that I was doing that on purpose. So it can happen, right? Number 7, when I hear about rapes or murders in the news, I would like to get back at the person who did the crime. That's a good. You hear lots of people, when they hear about these things, they say, "Oh, I'd like to go and kill that person, or I'd like to go and beat that person up because of what they did." Right? And I mean, it's just almost a natural thing for most people to think like that, because you think, how wrong is that? And then you want to go and actually do something about it. And so these thoughts go on in your mind that you would like to get back at the person who did the crime, right? And I mean, I can't say that I've never felt like that. And I've, sometimes even still say it, that I wish that abusers who abuse children would have to feel the exact same thing that they're doing to their children, whether it's verbal, emotional, psychological, or physical. I'm like, hey, wouldn't that be great? For everything that they do to a child, they would feel the same thing. Then they would know what they're doing to their children, right? But unfortunately, that's not the way it works, right? That is not the way it goes. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and 2 wrongs never make a right. That's for sure. So, abuse is wrong in every case. So it says here, question number 8, when another driver tailgates me or cuts in front of me, I tend to react and honk my horn or flash my lights. So, and I mean, when people used to cut in front of me, I mean, I wouldn't just honk my horn and flash my lights, man. I'd be flipping them off and screaming at them, sometimes chasing them down the road. I was really a road rage person. I mean, I used to be a crazy driver, and I used to have a lot of road rage. The one time this guy actually tagged my car. He hit my car while we were driving, and I literally chased him down in my car, made him stop and get out, and he was running from me in his car because he didn't have any insurance. And I said, I don't care if you have insurance or not. You don't hit somebody and take off. But see, well, the sad thing is that many years before that, I had hit a car and took off. So it's not like I was expecting somebody else to behave a certain way and not me. So these things, if we're going to be honest, we have to be honest with ourselves. There's no sense in being unperfect with everybody else. It's like, no, if you can't remember that far back, which I have a great long-term memory. My short-term memory is actually not all that great, but my long-term memory is very good. And I mean, I can remember stuff that I've done that I would expect other people to uphold and behave a certain way, which when I didn't. So I mean, I have to be honest with myself. When we're doing this stuff, we have to be really honest. There's no sense in lying about it. And our first response would be the best. So that's why when you're doing this stuff, your first response would be the most accurate one, right? We have about a minute left. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You can go and check this out, www.angerresources.com, and finish this little thing here. We'll finish this tomorrow, and we'll take a look at the scoring on how it is. There's 29 questions, but it does give us an idea of just how angry we really are, or hostile, right? So have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, whatnot. I'll be around. And otherwise, have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye.